wasn't here, but this could not be further from the idea of any sort of work for me. Chris phoned me and said, we're going to be honouring Barry Humphries. I said, I'll do it. I was a student here in Bristol in 1995. I had a bedsit up just on the edge of Clifton, and I was actually in my bed, which was a futon, because you could have those in those days. And my landlord, as he was quite keen on doing, welcomed himself into my bedroom. And he knew that I was just at the very beginning of playing around with comedy and doing stand-up and character and sketch and improv and stuff. And he said, look, I've got a spare ticket for a show down at the Hippodrome. It's that Barry Humphries chap. And I had to conceal from my landlord, whilst lying in bed, how excited I was about going to see perhaps the greatest female impersonator in the entire world, which I succeeded in doing. But I went down to the Hippodrome, not quite knowing what to expect. I'd seen some of Barry's work on television, and I was just blown away by how masterful he was and his ability to hold the audience completely rapt, and so funny, so unbelievably funny. I'd seen him on telly and I'd laughed lots, but I was just blown away. And then in January of this year, I went to see Eat, Pray, Laugh, which I'm hoping some of you, did you see Eat, Pray, Laugh? Just, again, an absolutely sensational show. So I shall say nothing more about my experience other than how delighted I am, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Barry Humphries. Oh. Well played, well played.
Incidentally, in your introduction, you described me as a female impersonator.
Well,
no,
yes.
I'm not. Well, it's almost right. I think I'm a housewife impersonator. And there is a difference, you know.
Yes.
Marcus.
Either way, it was important for me to conceal it from my landlord.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
It was
yes.
nice of him.
Yeah, it was. It was.
But also, I mean, I think I managed to impersonate this Australian woman without, and this is where good taste comes in, without in any way producing a figure who is sexually arousing. And that, I consider that my principal skill. Edna has never, to my knowledge, received a fan letter from a randy gentleman or lady.
You
That's
never
not
know.
Bad, is it?
You never know. But the first incarnation of, in case, by the way, anyone doesn't know who we're talking about at this stage, the first incarnation was, I think, when you were at university, wasn't it, in 1955, Mrs. Norm Everage. Mm. And did you have any idea at that stage what you'd stumbled upon?
Not at all. This was the year before the Olympic Games came to Melbourne. This was a major event in our city. And remember, Melbourne pretended to be in the home counties. It was, in the 1880s, along with Buenos Aires, the richest city in the world because of the discovery of gold. It is still a wonderful museum of Victorian architecture, like Glasgow and Calcutta. But we got the Olympics, and it was a great worry to the people, the councillors, because they thought people are going to come from all over the world to Melbourne. What will they think if they see these Victorian buildings? They'll think we're out of date. So they pulled as many down as possible, which meant that some of our best buildings, which were hotels, were not there when people needed accommodation desperately. And the Melbourne papers all had ads asking housewives to offer their spare rooms, you know, to Latvian shop putters. So we were doing a Christmas show, and I wrote a sketch about a Melbourne woman who came from a suburb called Moonee Ponds, which is a real suburb. And I'd never been there, and it was as far away from my parents' suburb as possible, though that was what it was all about. And I had her offering her beautiful home to a possible athlete. And all she did was really describe her home in very minute detail. And there were no jokes. It was just a description of a house by a very shy, rather dowdy woman, young mother. And it got an extraordinary reaction from the audience, and I realized I'd hit a sort of vein of humor. Mm. It's a nice feeling, you know it.
Yes.
And after that, I just put this character in a box and forgot about her until I developed a sort of an evening of various characters that I'd written, and I opened the box and out she came, but a little different, a little more confident, a little more decorative. Well, in the 50s, late 50s, I'd written a short story about a boring man of the suburbs. My early things are sort of very snobbish, and really a reaction to this respectable middle-class background that I had. And it was very stultifying, really, life in Melbourne, the respectability. It was the age of what we called Laminex, that's your Formica. It was the culture of cleanliness and respectability, and I found that so oppressive that I sort of lashed out. And I wrote this piece about an old man of the suburbs and relating his week. And of course, I discovered that a lot of Australian men don't have strong voices. There's quite a lot of people speak rather like that, and very, sometimes quite sibilant because of an ill-fitting denture. And I thought I would write about someone and subsequently do it on the stage who would talk to the audience very, very boringly and see how much boredom they could take. And I found that they could take quite a lot of boredom. And so I cleansed the text of anything that was even remotely humorous. And it was even funnier. And I kept this character in my repertoire. And as the years went by, the character makeup became less necessary. Until now, I am beyond the age of the character. I killed him off in the 70s and brought him back as a ghost. And because his life and even his death is so uneventful and uninteresting, he could go on forever. Just as Edna can be an expert on so many subjects because she is ignorant of all of them. She has an opinion on everything. That's the liberating aspect to ignorance.
Absolutely.
So Sandy is my favorite character because I can do it sitting down in a dressing gown with a hot water bottle which has got hot water in it. And of course his wife is still alive in a facility for the bewildered. I think he's a good character. It's risky to do it. I mean, in this show, I thought, after the vulgarity and ebullience of Les Patterson, will they take a slow movement as slow as that? But it works quite well, as you noticed.
Yes, it
and
really
I think
does.
the audiences need a break, frankly. Again, in the early 70s, I was told by someone who was then my manager, that I was missing out on a big audience in Australia. They said, "You're just playing to the middle class audiences. You always have. The big working class audience doesn't go to the theatre. They go to the clubs, the football clubs, where they have the gambling machines. And there's a huge one in Sydney, and they can afford to pay Sinatra and Sammy Davis and all those people to come out and perform there." And he said, "I think you should play one of those clubs." I said, "I'd be terrified." I said, "They'd boo me off the stage if I came on dressed up as Edna, you know." And he said, "Well, he mentioned a figure." So I thought about it. And I thought, how can I explain Edna to these people? So I invented an imaginary club secretary called Les Patterson. And Les came on in a powder blue suit with a few stains on it, and a big wide tie, and platform shoes, which, believe it or not, were ubiquitous in the early 1970s, slightly flared trousers. And he said, "Good evening, fellas, ladies and gentlemen." He said, "Look, we had a love. Shirley Bassey was going to be performing tonight, but unfortunately her plane has been delayed. Indefinitely," she said. No Malaysian jokes, I don't suppose, appropriate. And luckily, saving the day, an ordinary woman from Melbourne who was up here on a holiday has offered to step into the bridge. So I'd like you all to give her the clap she so richly deserves. And that explained Edna. How I managed to do that quick change from the announcement to the entrance of Edna, I'm afraid is lost in the mists of memory. But anyway, it went on very, very well, and I realized that this was a popular audience I needed. I didn't want a whole lot of people feeling superior, you know. So Les was born, and I kept him in the act. His teeth got worse, his stains got more indelible, and his expectorations more copious. And these days, Les can spit as far as the 5th row. And even recently in Manchester, right across a very wide orchestra pit. But he's an amusing character to do because he is, you see, he's extremely dirty. And he tells stories which I wouldn't dream of telling anybody. And if he were any cleaner, he would be offensive, you see. He is so excessive, and I'm watching, you see. I like to look at the audience, as you must. And if old ladies are smiling, reluctantly at first, and then it's all right. I'm keeping an eye on people, you know. You lose some, of course. Unfortunately, there's an empty seat, or someone leaves, and you have to tell the audience, explain that they're from Switzerland. You know.